Awesome. Okay, let's turn in our Bibles to the first book of Kings, chapter 18. So before I jump into explaining or revealing the mystery of Baal and how that unfolds in the Bible and in human history, I want us to go and look again, because we're looking at the spirit and power of Elijah. Elijah was raised up to confront Ahab and Jezebel, who were propagating and promoting the Baal worship system in Israel. And at the end of the age, we see that Elijah comes again. He's one of the two witnesses. That's most people believe that. But I also believe that the spirit and power of Elijah, as it was on John the Baptist to prepare the way for the coming of the Lord, that the spirit and power of Elijah is going to be poured out over the church. And obviously, Joel 2, when it says all flesh, doesn't mean that every single individual person gets the Spirit of the Lord anointing. Obviously, we have to believe it and receive it by faith. But it's the outpouring of the Spirit at the end of the age is for anybody, man or woman, young or old, that has the faith and willingness to receive it. They often say that when Jezebel comes, so does Elijah. And Jezebel, we won't look specifically at the mystery of Jezebel, but it's based with the gods Asherah, or goddesses Asherah and Ashtoreth, and they're part of the Baal worship pantheon. But we're not going to go into those guys tonight. I want to look at Baal. He is the master and the Lord and the ruler over the demonic powers that Elijah had to contend against. But let's look at 1 Kings 18, verse 20. So Ahab sent for all the people of Israel. He gathered all of the prophets together. It's the prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel. Elijah came near to all the people and he said, "How long are you going to be limping or dancing between two different opinions? If Yahweh is God, follow him, worship him. But if Baal is God, then worship him, follow him." The people did not answer him a word. So Elijah said to the people, I only am left of all the prophets of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450. And so get 2 bulls and let's build 2 altars. It goes into this whole thing. Please note, there is one prophet of Yahweh contending against 450 Baal prophets. There's a point I want to make before we start looking at the mystery of Baal. So what they do is they build an altar for Baal. Baal is the god of thunder. He's the god of fire. He's the god of lightning. He's the Thor in the Scandinavian gods. That's Thor, and he's a mixture between Thor and Odin, Thor's father. Okay. And so later on, after they build the altars, the Baal prophets, they do all of their worship. They cry out to Baal. Nothing happens. And so then Elijah says, okay, he builds an altar with 12 stones, each representing the divided house of Israel. And so he puts together an altar of the 12 stones, and then he puts the wood on the altar, the sacrifice on the wood, and then he commands water to be poured over everything. A trench is dug all around. So everything is being soaked. So you think everything that could ever quench the fire has been poured out over this altar, and over the wood and over the sacrifice. Everything that could quench the fire. Think about that. And then that's where we pick up verse 30. And Elijah cried out to all the people, "Come near to me." And all the people came near to him. He repaired the altar of Yahweh that had been thrown down. Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of Yahweh had come, saying, "Israel shall be your name." And with the stones he built an altar and in the name of Yahweh, and he made a trench about it, and a great mound of mold of 2 seers, written in Old English here. So a trench was built, and he put wood in order, and he cut the bull in pieces and laid it on the wood, and he said, "Now cry, fill all the jars with water, pour it out over the burnt offering and the wood, and do it a second time." They did it a second time. Do it a third time. They did it a third time. So water ran over the altar, over the sacrifice, into the trench. At that time, the offering is the offering of the obligation or oblation. This is the evening offering, evening sacrifice. Elijah the prophet came near and said, Yahweh, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, Jacob, let it be known this day that you are the true God of Israel, and I am your servant, and that I've done all these things according to your word. Answer me, O Yahweh, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Yahweh, are truly God, and that you have turned their hearts again back to yourself. Then a fire of Yahweh fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust. It licked up the water in the trench. When the people saw this, they fell on their faces and they cried out, Yahweh, He is God. Yahweh, He is God. And so Elijah said, now seize those prophets of Baal. Don't let them escape. They seized them. Elijah brought them down to the brook of Kishon and they slaughtered them there. Okay. One prophet against 450. And there's a 450, the prophets of Asherah. I shared a bit about them last week. The prophets of Asherah were transvestite drag queen prophets. That's what the prophets are like. They're men that get their manhood cut off. They wear women's clothes. They grow their hair long like a woman, and they put on women's makeup. And then they get possessed by the spirit of Asherah or Ashtoreth, and they become oracles. And they're like the ones that promote. So you can see Ashtoreth is rising right now with the whole drag queen thing that's going on. So what happens here again? He cries out to Yahweh, and Yahweh's fire falls. It says in the New Testament that if God is for us, who can be against us? And so I want us to remember that as we look at the mystery of Baal. Remember how one man who was a righteous man, James chapter 5, a man just like us. He wasn't superhero, he wasn't superhuman, he had no magic powers. He's a human being just like us, but he was righteous because he understood how to walk in the righteousness of the Lord by faith, how to apply the blood of the sacrifice for the cleansing of sin, and he set himself apart for God. And it says, a prayer of a righteous man availeth much. It's powerful and it's effective. And also, Elijah's apprentice later on, Elisha, he was surrounded by a huge army of thousands. And he had a servant that saw the army of the Assyrians surround them at Dothan. And he was freaking out, the apprentice. And Elisha said, don't fear, there's more with us than there are against us. And the apprentice just didn't get this, the apprentice prophet. And he says, Lord, open his eyes. And so I'm asking the Lord would open your eyes tonight, that as we talk about the enemy, we want to make sure that we have third heaven revelation, not just second heaven revelation. This is all about a second heaven power, but we worship the third heaven power, Yahweh, and Jesus is the fullness of the manifestation of Yahweh, and He is the Lord of hosts, Yahweh of the host, the commander of the heavenly armies, and there's more with us on our side than all the demonic powers that are there on the side of the occultists. And on top of that, even without the angels, we have Yahweh on our side, the creator of the universe. So let's remember that. Okay, so Baal. Baal's name means, from the Canaanite language, master, lord, or possessor. Master, lord, or possessor. He is the one that would possess the nation and make it his possession. And he is the master. Now we saw last week how originally at the Tower of Babel we have Nimrod, the first Antichrist. Nimrod's wife Semiramis, their son Tammuz, they become the template of the occult world. And all of the different gods and deities, because humanity got separated and scattered across the face of the earth, and they took the Babylonian worship system of Nimrod and it went out to all the ancient peoples, to the Mayans and the Incas and the Aztecs and into China and all of those ancient peoples, into Africa. The original religion was this religion that came directly out of Babylon, and that's going to be resurging, Mystery Babylon, in the last days. And so the reason I share that is Nimrod gets known or worshipped by many names in these different cultures. In Canaan, he was worshipped as Baal. So that's the representation of the Antichrist, Baal, the spirit of Antichrist. In Babylon, he's worshipped as Baal. Another ancient people of the Middle East, they called him Belas or Basus. And that's where you get the connection now linguistically with Zeus Olympus or Zeus, out of the Greek god Zeus. Okay? Zeus Olympus in the Greco-Roman part of the worship, the Roman part, is known as Jupiter Belus. So even there it's more direct. The name Bel or Belas, Jupiter Belas. Olympus, it means heaven. So Baal Shaman is the Baal or the master or the ruler of the heavens. Okay? And he's a counterfeit. He's the ultimate counterfeit. So Antichrist is the anti-Messiah. He's the counterfeit Messiah. And Baal is the counterfeit of Yahweh. In fact, remember when Jesus was casting out demons, and the scribes and the Pharisees they did not recognize Jesus as Messiah. They see Jesus as a false Messiah. Okay? And so they say he is not doing this by the power of God, Yahweh. He is casting out demons by Beelzebub. That's Baal-Zebub. Baal-Zebub is the Canaanite name for the Lord of hosts. Now, the Jewish people, they used to do lots of word plays with names of the pagan deities. And so, Jezebel, which means the wife or consort of Baal, they made her name the woman that will refuse to submit to a man. The woman that rebels against her husband, And so they changed the meaning. So they changed Beelzebub a little bit and they made it the Lord of the Flies. Okay? But it actually means the Lord of hosts. He's a counterfeit. But his hosts are not the loyal angelic powers that are submitted to Yahweh. These are the fallen angels that become demonic deities. And he's the ruler of those ones. And so understand that he counterfeits things. He is there to possess. Okay. Now, there is a connection between Baal directly and Satan found in Scripture. And I'll just track with you through this. In Daniel, it talks about the abomination that causes desolation. And one of the things we're going to look at as we go through this series, we end up looking at Moloch and Ashtoreth. They're the blood war gods. They're the destroyers. It starts off with Baal and Asherah worship, fertility. They're the fertility gods. They're the gods of prosperity. They're the gods of blessing. But they're also the gods of sexuality and so drunkenness and orgies and alcohol and pleasure. But then when you open the door to them, then you open the door eventually to Moloch, the devourer, the destroyer, and Ashtoreth. And she's also a destroyer. Okay, so the abomination that causes desolation. Desolation is destruction. And so the connection between Baal and the abomination that causes desolation is the same as the connection between the Antichrist and the abomination that causes desolation. So I'm giving you an overview tonight, otherwise we'll never get through this with Scripture. But it's in the book of Daniel. And Daniel talks about the abomination that causes desolation. And when you see that set up, then you know that we only have a short time left. And there's 3.5 years left once that happens. And the first time the abomination that causes desolation was fulfilled in history was 168 BC. In fact, the history of 168 BC and what leads up to 168 BC is given in Daniel chapter 10 and 11 in incredible detail. The rise and fall of kings and rulers to this Syrian Greek king called Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, he's not named in Daniel, but we know this from history, and it's in 1st and 2nd Maccabees. So you see the fulfillment of Daniel, a lot of Daniel chapter 10 is in 1st and 2nd Maccabees. And so Antiochus Epiphanes, his name means Antiochus is the one that is against authority, Epiphanies mean I am God manifest. It's almost like the Antichrist name, you know. I'm against God's authority and I am God manifest. And Antiochus Epiphanes, he comes into ancient Israel and he starts destroying the Yahweh worship system to the point that he puts into the temple. They turn the temple in Jerusalem into a pagan temple, and in the most holy place they set up an idol of Zeus. And then they sacrifice pigs in the temple, and they have all of the male and the female prostitutes having ritual sex in the temple, including the transvestite, homosexual prostitutes. That was going on in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And when that happened, and that idol of Zeus was set up, that's when Antiochus Epiphanes went all out and started wiping out men, women, and children all across Israel. And so that's the first fulfillment. When the Maccabees defeated the armies of Antiochus Epiphanes, and they went back and they retook Jerusalem and the temple and cleansed the temple, and they destroyed the altar of Zeus, Antiochus Epiphanes' good friend established in the city of Pergamum a temple for Zeus in Antiochus Epiphanes' honor. The temple of Pergamum was a temple of Zeus. It's called the Holocaustos, which means burnt offering. And in Revelation chapter 2, when Jesus is speaking to the church of that city, he says, you live in the city where Satan has his throne. So the temple of Zeus was literally built like a throne, a huge throne, and where the bull, which the symbol of Baal is the bull, okay? The symbol of Zeus is the bull. The symbol of Jupiter is the bull. And the bull was a bronze bull in which they would put human beings and they'd cook them alive as human sacrifice. And that was right where the throne, center of the throne, which was the temple of Pergamum. And Jesus calls the temple of Zeus the temple of Satan. You live in the city where Satan dwells. That's interesting that Satan had a geographic location for the center of his world empire. At that time, Jesus said it's Pergamum. Okay, so the reason I'm saying that, the abomination that causes desolation, now you've got this connection with Zeus, and some of you heard me tell the story when in the 1800s, archaeologists found the temple of Pergamum that had just fallen into disrepair. They pulled it and took it into Germany, rebuilt it. When they took it over to Germany, Adolf Hitler was born. And when they finished rebuilding it, World War I broke out. And then they made the Pergamum Museum around it. When that was finished, the Nazi Party came to power. And then Adolf Hitler's chief architect, he actually went to build a platform from which Adolf Hitler would declare the vision of the Third Reich, the vision of their new world empire. And it was going to be set up in a place called Nuremberg. It's called the Nuremberg Stadium. And so this architect was seeking some inspiration, and he went into the Pergamum Museum. He looked at the Pergamum Temple, the throne of Satan, and he actually built Adolf Hitler's platform in Nuremberg designed off that. By the way, Obama spoke from one that's very similar. I've actually got photos of it when he was saying that, you know, change you can believe in. Obama stood on the same platform, but in America. So then what happens? Adolf Hitler stands there and declares what? The Holocaustos. And then after Nazi Germany was defeated, it gets moved from Berlin to Russia. And now we have the threat of nuclear Holocaustos. It goes global. It's back in Germany now after the Berlin Wall fell. It's back in Germany. And Germany is the center of the power of the EU, which has all of the markings of a restored Roman Empire. And so I'm trying to let you know how these things are fitting in. And so you've got to understand, Zeus is a manifestation of Baal, and they're both manifestations of Satan himself. The interesting thing to find out, 70 AD, when the Romans finally destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, which was a partial fulfillment of the abomination that causes desolation. The Romans actually worshipped the Roman gods at the east gate of the temple. They never actually went into the most holy place, so it doesn't fulfill the Antichrist going into the most holy place, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. But it was a partial fulfillment. And the interesting thing is 132 AD. So now the temple's been destroyed since 70 AD, not to be restored. It's under Roman control, the city of Jerusalem. And then the Emperor Hadrian renames Jerusalem after the Roman god Jupiter. Who is Jupiter? Baal, Zeus, Jupiter, Satan. Okay? And so not only does he do that, he builds on the Temple Mount, which has been desolate since 70 AD, and now he builds on the Temple Mount a temple to Jupiter, and where the most holy place used to be, they raise up an idol of Jupiter. And that lasts until 691 AD, and that's when the Muslims armies come in and take Jerusalem. Islam has now become a power, and where the temple of Jupiter used to be, where the temple of Yahweh used to be, they build the mosque and the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock is where the most holy place used to be. Okay? And so we looked last week at where Jesus said, you know, you cast a demon out, but if the demon comes back and finds its house clean but empty, it's not filled with the power and presence of Yahweh, it's clean but it's empty, then that spirit goes and gets 7 more powerful than itself, and it repossesses that house. And so it's moved from just, you know, the Antiochus Epiphanes with Zeus to the Roman Empire to Islam, and then in the last days we're going to see this global Antichrist empire re-established, and that Antichrist is going to walk into a rebuilt temple in that place. So we're seeing this, there's a spirit, you know, people come and go, but the demonic powers do not. Demonic powers, until the time that is assigned for them, will not be cast into hell or the lake of fire. Remember when Jesus came and the demons said, oh, we know who you are, Holy One of God. Have you come to cast us into hell before our time? And they know they have a time.
That's it, yeah.
Okay, that's why Revelation 12, when the dragon and the fallen angels are cast down, they're raging because they know their time is short. Okay, so there's none of this, I bind you in Jesus' name and cast you into hell with unbreakable chains. It's just not biblical. You bind up the enemy with the name of Jesus, but those spirits will move around, they'll loosen themselves, or people will loosen them by submitting to them. And so the demonic spirits continue to be active until the second coming. Demonic deities that have characteristics and strategies, and you can look at history and discern them through history. Impossible for me tonight to go into the fullness of the history of how this spirit manifests, but I'm just giving you some understanding with all of this. It's very interesting. The symbol of the EU is on their stamp is the woman Europa. That's where the Europe gets her name. It's from a Greek legend about a woman who was very, very beautiful and seductive with her beauty, and Zeus falls in love with her, and Zeus takes on the form of a bull, and he comes down and he seduces her, go figure, and then he takes her against her will, and she rides on his back, and he forces her to marry him. And that's the legend of Europa riding on the bull, and that's the stamp of the EU. They literally have the woman riding on the red bull, the red dragon. And outside of the EU's headquarters there is a huge bronze bull. Did any of you see the Commonwealth Games that were held in the UK a couple of years ago? And they had this huge bull with a woman riding on the bull, and all the people were going around bowing down and worshipping this huge bull. What you've got to understand is there are powers in high levels of government globally who 100% know who they are and what they're doing. They're occultists, and more than that, they're Satanists. But they've been behind the scenes, manipulating history, but they've been hiding in the shadows. But we're now seeing they're coming out of the shadows into the public arena. And this is a thing called, it's occult messaging, and you'll see it in many of the Olympic Games and different things. There's a huge big celebration they had in Europe too. They had a huge tunnel that went between Germany and Switzerland, I think it was, and it was full on pagan occult rituals going on at that time. So, you know, we talked about this last week, Return of the Gods. When you cast Yahweh and Yahweh worship, or Christianity gets cast out of nations, it leaves a spiritual vacuum, and all of the old earth lords, powers and principalities are now rising, and they're retaking their thrones. This is where we are globally right now. Okay. Something very interesting. A number of years ago in New York City, they built a gate of Baal. Have you ever heard of that? The gate of the Temple of Baal. So, going back in history, when ISIS was rising in Syria, there was a Temple of Baal, for reals, a Temple of Baal, with a Roman temple connected to it. So the Romans were worshipping Baal there. And ISIS destroyed it, and they destroyed the gate to that temple. And then what they did is they rebuilt, they designed it, and they rebuilt it in China. The globalists were involved with this, and they built it in China, and they set it up in New York City at the gateway to the economic center of New York City, where they have Wall Street and everything like that. And what do they have at Wall Street? Outside the stock market exchange? A huge bronze bull. It's called the bull market. This is all intentional. The bronze bull, the red is bronze, bull, represents Baal or Satan. And now they've got the gate of Baal's worship established in front of the economic center in New York City. But there's more. Now I put this up online so you can go back and see that I'm not making it up and where I get a source. Charisma magazine did an article of this. I found about 5 different articles by different Christian organizations that state these facts. The World Heritage Organization is behind the re-establishment of the gate of Baal's temple. Their plan is to build 1,000 of them. And they've already placed them in New York City, Washington DC, Hollywood, London. They're in Syria and several other nations, but they're going to put them in 1,000 nations. And they've all been built by laser printing. It's got the laser printers in communist China. They're building 1,000 and they're putting it out there. Wherever they have been doing a World Economic Forum or G7 global summits, they established the gate in that city. So the same time that the globalists are doing their economic forum and their global leaders coming together about the world economy, they set up the gate of Baal. This is intentional. From a Christian perspective, we call it prophetic acts. It's when a prophet would do something, they're not prophesying with words of prophecy, they're actually doing something. It could be a dance, or there's a symbol or something that actually is a message. And more than that, they are establishing in 1,000 global cities gates of Hades. It's another way for us to say that. So we need to know that this is something serious. The occultists are on the move, and this is why we're seeing an increase of the manifestation of different things happening. Okay, so again, Baal, he is worshipped as the fertility god. He's the god of prosperity, and you'd sacrifice children to Moloch, and Moloch is the other face of Baal. We looked at that last week. Although we need to look at their manifestations separately because there's some difference. But every male and female, these are the 4 faces of Satan actually. Satan has 2 male faces and 2 female faces, okay? Baal, and he's the fertility, prosperity God, and you worship him for material gain, but you worship him by sacrificing children and people to Moloch, the god of blood. And then the female is Asherah and Ashtoreth. Again, as we go through the series, we'll go back in and look at that more. He's the god of the harvest, and what they used to do is, in order to get his blessing, they used to do animal and human sacrifices, and they would seed the soil with the blood. And then they would cry, so that the animal and human sacrifices would be made to Baal for the harvest, and they'd use the blood to seed. So that's how they do that. They'd also seed it by holding drunken orgies, and they'd seed it with the human seed of the drunken orgies, the spillover of human seed. Okay, so this is definitely not Sunday church, this system. It's a system that is based in debauchery and sexual immorality. Okay. Now the interesting thing is, Asherah, and we'll go and look at her more later, but I need to mention this. Baal being the male, his consort is Asherah. Asherah is also called Mother Nature or Mother Earth. So when you're seeding the soil, you're seeding Mother Earth. And this is what it says in Romans. The whole Baal worship system is based in two things. One is called pantheism. Pantheism is basically, we worship the universe. The universe is God. God is the universe. God is in all things. It's kind of like Star Wars. You know the Force, and the Force is in everything. He's the life force of all things. That's Eastern religion, but that's also pagan occult religion. The force that is in all things. And so when you worship the universe, what does it say in Romans 1? They stop worshipping the Creator and they start worshipping the creation. That's a major part of the Baal worship system. The second part of the Baal worship system, so we've got here pantheism, and there's the polytheism. Polytheism is that there are many gods. There's not just one God, there's many gods. And the interesting thing is, if you study Baal in the Bible, you'll see that there is many different Baals. So basically the different Baals were representing different territories. So yes, this territory has a Baal, and this Baal has a truth, and this territory has a Baal. So there's Baal Peor, there's Baal Hebron, there's all these different Baals. So the thing that confused me when I walked away from the Lord when I was younger, I was brought up a Christian, and we've got one God. And the thing that confused me is I thought, okay, well, what's there to say that I'm right, or my mum and dad are right? Who says that Yahweh or Jesus is God? Maybe the Buddhists are right, maybe this is right. And so I actually went into studying New Age and Buddhism and everything like that. And I just got totally confused, because when I was a Christian, I know who I'm worshipping, right? And there's one God and there's one truth. There's one right, there's one wrong. When I got involved with all this other stuff, it was just like, wow, there's just so many different belief systems, and every God had his own truth. And if you want to worship this God, then this is what's right and wrong in the worship of this God. If you want to worship that God, this is what's right and wrong. And that is the nature of the Baal worship system, is that there is not one truth. There is not moral absolutes. It's actually can be dependent. And people make gods according to their own image. And so, you know, I want to get involved with sexual immorality, so I'm going to have a God that lets me have sexual immorality. You know, people make Jesus in their own image. You know, I want to have sex out of marriage and live with my girlfriend before I get married, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a Jesus that lets me do that. That's Baal. That's your worshipping Baal, not Jesus, in that sort of thing. And so this system, the moral absolutes of the divine order of Yahweh get cast aside. So they would say in the Gaia or nature worship, Gaia is another name given for Asherah, man is of nature, nature is of man, man is God, therefore nature is God, everything is God. And therefore animals are God. And now this brings something else in. In the pagan worldview, there is human beings who are animals, and there are the animals that are animals. We're all animals. Okay, we're highly evolved animals, but we're still animals. And that's why in all of paganism, as you go globally, remember the Baal worship system or the Nimrod worship system went global. That's why wherever you go in the ancient world and look at gods that they worship, they're half man, half beast. Humans with the heads of bulls and elephants and crocodiles, and you know, the top is a man, the bottom is a horse or a goat, and all of this, there's this mix that's going on in the pagan worldview. You know, so enter Darwinism. You know, what happened with the Western world where we had a Judeo-Christian moral ethic and we understood that there is God who is a creator and we are the offspring of God. Darwinism, because of science has now become a pseudo-religion. Because science is not really about the search for truth anymore. Science is about whoever has the most money and they're offering to pay you, and if you don't say what they want you to say, you lose your budget. You know? And global agendas. We saw what happened in COVID. Anyone that rose up and spoke against the agenda, any doctor that had a concern, boom. You know, they said, all the experts agree. And so when an expert got up and says, well, I don't actually agree. And they go, well, you're not an expert anymore, you're sacked. Okay? So this is something, so that the mix between human and animal, where humans, because in God's word it says it's an abomination to mix. Humans are humans, animals are animals. It's abomination to have sex with animals. In the Baal worship system, sex with animals was holy. Sex with children was holy. They'd have sex, homosexual sex. It's just all sex. There was no boundaries or limits. There's a reason why in the Bible God spoke through Moses and gave the laws saying man shall not sleep with animals. And people go, why would God ever command that? You know why? They were doing it.
That's it. Yeah.
You should not have sex with a child. Why? They're doing it. And so this is the thing about the Elijah system, or the Jesus system, even better, is we start to bring people back to moral absolutes, and we have a definition of what is God's divine order of truth. Whereas this other system is destroying the order of truth, and now it's like, well, there's many different truths. There's yours truth, and there's my truth, and you know, if I want to identify as a cat, I'm allowed to do that now. And that's the spirit behind what's going on. And that's also Ashtoreth. Ashtoreth is the one, she's a shapeshifter, and she could change. She could be a man, she could be a woman, she could be a human, she could be an animal. She shapeshifts. There's nothing that's what she really is. She present herself however people want to see her. And that demonic spirit is part of the Baal worship system. The problem for a lot of the global elites in what they're wanting to do to bring humanity to their next level of evolution, so they say, because we've been stunted, and if you read articles, they say Judeo-Christianity is now holding us back. It's hindering us in our process of evolution to the next stage. And part of what they are doing, but it's not legal, because the legal system in the Western nations is still based in the Judeo-Christian moral ethic system, you see. That's why they're trying to undermine it, because they have many, many agendas. And what they're doing in secret labs, this is happening in communist China anyway, because they don't have a Judeo-Christian moral ethic limit with their law, is they're actually trying to clone human and animal DNA and try to actually create human-animal hybrids. Okay? That's happening now. And I heard people talking about this 30, 40 years ago. It's happening now. But it's illegal. And so according to God's order, you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And the whole thing of transhumanism, mixing human beings with the AI and the digital robotics, etc. There's that whole thing. Now, I don't have a problem with someone getting a robotic arm. But once you start to deal with AI or brain implants, it's actually going to change or it's going to majorly shift who you are and your identity as a human being, because there's something else in you that can take over. So that's a modern sort of manifestation. They didn't have it back in those days, but they had all the myth. And this is interesting. To paganism, there is no real difference between the truth of what we can scientifically see and feel and hear and have evidence for, and myth. And so in their worship system, that's why they would use drugs. That's the word sorcery. In the Greek, it is pharmakia. And if you study the Hebrew word for sorcery, it's also the Hebrew for drugs. They use drugs and everything. Why? When you're on drugs, you start to hallucinate, and you can actually manipulate what people hallucinate. They get like all the idols with mirrors all around them, and they have all the smoke coming into the room with flashing torches and different lights, and they move the mirrors around, and you're on drugs. So then they start talking behind the mirrors like the gods are talking, and you've now got the gods have come alive. The image of the beast now speaks, which we're going to see at the end of the age. The image of the beast will speak. And it's the mark of the beast and the image of the beast. So there's these things that it's not new. The technologies are now becoming newer, but they're things that have happened in history. So you've got AI. What's AI? You know, artificial intelligence. Then you've got virtual reality, which is going to a whole new level. Now, the danger of virtual reality is if people, you look how hooked and addicted people get on their iPhones. It's extremely addictive. Right? They're even talking about now that we won't have to carry an iPhone around, but they're going to actually implant it, where we can actually now we can connect with our iPhones in our mind. Wow. And they said by 2030 we'll probably have that technology fully worked out. So you'll no more losing your iPhone, and you know, and that's when you can just look into something, and through your eye, all of your informations are there. They're working on this technology now. Wow. Okay, but what happens because in the old pagan world, and I've lived in Tibet, I've lived amongst Buddhists and Hindus, and they really believe in the spirit of the tree, the spirit of the rock, you know, and they really believe when they see this bee, it could be their uncle, it could be their auntie. Oh, don't kill the fly because you could be killing grandma. They really believe this stuff. Because they've got a worldview that they've been taught this over and over and over again. If you teach someone a worldview enough, especially since they're young children, this is why they're targeting the children. Okay? Then what happens is they grow up with a worldview, and even though it's not the truth of reality, they believe it is. They're reading into what they see and hear. But you marry into that virtual reality, where if you've got implants in your mind that you're going to be seeing things that aren't there, but to you it's really there. And this is where they're wanting to take us. But also the resurgence of all of the Dreamtime spirits, etc. So we're literally seeing a lot of demonic powers that if not fully bound and inactive, they were really working in the secret, hidden places. But now we're seeing them being loosened, and their influence over human beings' dreams and thoughts and etc. They're starting to now manifest in ways that demons can manifest, that you can see them. And so what's happening now, the reality according to God's divine order and this other reality are starting to merge. And it's got to do, it's a demonic reality where the demons are, and they're liars. It's not a truth, it's a counterfeit of reality. But the thing is, they're giving a counterfeit understanding of the world, the worldview, the world we live in, etc. That's why Satan's called the God of this world, cosmos. It's dealing with the cosmos isn't just the natural realm, it's the natural realm and the realm of the gods. And that's the cosmos. And Satan rules over the powers and principalities, of which Baal is one of the key. He was known as of the warrior king, and he'd wage war against every other god, and he'd force them into submission under him. And then they'd serve him and help build his empire. Now, one of the things I want to focus on a Baal worship system to explain something that's going on now as we move towards the end of the age. We went back to the Tower of Babel under Nimrod. Wherever the towers of Babel got built, they're basically like a pyramid, you know. the ziggurats in ancient Babylon had a flat top like this. The Aztecs, the Mayans, they have similar structures. The Egyptians go for the full pyramid. They found these in Siberia. They find these all over the world now. Some of them, they thought they were mountains, and they found that this is actually a structure underneath the mountain. It's like all grass and dirt's growing on it. Okay, so in the book of Genesis, chapter 11, they said, let us make a name for ourselves. So Nimrod's goal, God said, scatter all over the face of the earth. And Nimrod said, no, don't obey Yahweh. We're going to rebel against the command of Yahweh. Everyone come together and we're going to make our names great. And he builds an empire. So instead of obeying the word of Yahweh and being fruitful and multiplying, they come together to build a power base. In the center of the power base was the Tower of Babel, and they were connecting with these demonic powers, what were called the gods, and they were getting guidance for how to establish this world empire. Now the reason I mention that is this is a pyramid system. Under all rule and authority is placed into the hands of one man. This is what we call a totalitarian dictatorship in modern language. And so Satan's kingdom and the Baal worship system is a totalitarian dictatorship. And when they rule through men, they start to take away men's authority, men's rights, and then it becomes you obey me or else. And then they get worshipped as gods. Ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, their chief leadership were worshipped as gods. And that's what's happening at the moment as we go into the end of the age. They're building a totalitarian dictatorship. So they offer, it's interesting, you listen to, whether it's the New Age or, just even witchcraft and all these other groups, what they offer to you is freedom and liberty and prosperity and life. We will set you free from the chains of the bondage of Judeo-Christianity, as it says in Psalms 2, that they want to be set free from the chains that bind them. But this is an interesting thing. You're either going to be a servant of Yahweh, who is a very good, caring father, or you're going to be slaves of a master who does not care about you at all.
Yeah.
So, a servant of a loving father who wants the best for you. So if he says no, there's a loving reason. When he says yes, there's a loving reason. There's boundary. There's reasons for boundary. Or, hey, there is no limit. There is no boundary. They even sing songs about this. We can do whatever we want. We have total freedom. You can have sex with whoever you want, whenever you want. And we want to destroy the Judeo-Christian thought about a husband and wife in marriage. We want to destroy marriage altogether, actually. And, you can have multiple partners or whatever. And so, but that system ends up leading to brokenness, woundedness, and bondage.
Yeah.
And you actually lose the true identity of who God's created you to be. That's how dangerous that thing is. So you start with the promise of freedom, you end up with bondage and slavery. You start with a promise of prosperity, but you end up as poor. Remember, in communist China, when I first went to China, it's before a lot of the economic reforms took place, and the old guard of communism was starting to fall and a new group was coming. They've kind of gone back into it all now. But the thing was, we saw what communism does in a system. You look at communist Russia, communist China, communist systems, the people are poor. Communism promises everybody, all you poor people, join us. We're going to rise up against the elites. We're going to rise up against those in authority. We're going to have equality. We want equality. The problem is with communist equality, it used to be that you have an upper class, a middle class, and a lower class. Communist equality is everyone becomes poor except for the elites.
That's it, yeah.
The elites are filthy rich.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And you look at people come across from China to Australia and they just buy cash all these houses and the best cars because they're the elites. They're coming from the elites. They have all the money and everything. Whereas the common people, they're,
So poor.
very, very poor. But that's communism. The only equality you end up getting, World Economic Forum, Schwab says, you'll own nothing but be happy. No, you'll own nothing, and you'll be totally controlled by totalitarian dictatorship. So this is where it's going. So Baal, he's the transformer, or he's the god of apostasy. So throughout Israel's history, he was the main god that Israel turned to worship. And you study the book of Judges. It says they turned to worship the Baals, and then they were enslaved. Time and time again. They turned to worship the Baals, and then all of the peoples that they were to drive out of the land came back and started to destroy and defeat them. And this is the nature. But Baal, he is the god of apostasy. He comes into a nation to turn people's hearts away from true Yahweh worship, away from the moral laws of God, the moral truths of God, and he starts to bring us into an apostasy, a deception. That apostasy then leads to judgments, ultimately. So he is the god of rebellion, and the Antichrist is literally called the man of lawlessness. And it says there, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the second coming of Jesus has not yet come. Don't believe anyone that says it has. But first, before the second coming, first is the apostasy. The great falling away from God's truth. Then the man of lawlessness will be fully revealed. Then he has control because people do not love the truth. People come under a great delusion because they do not love truth. That's the great apostasy. That's what political correctness is all about.
Yeah.
But I'm simply revealing to you there is a demonic power behind these agendas. This is not just a political movement. Okay? Even Karl Marx himself, he actually wrote a huge drama. And in that drama, he describes in incredible detail a satanic high ritual, a high Sabbath. In that satanic high Sabbath, that only someone that has inside information would know the details of it. In Russia, they actually made a movie of this. In communist Russia, the atheists don't believe in God. But anyway, here is this man goes into this satanic ritual. Satan comes out with a sword, and this Karl Marx says this of himself: I have purchased the sword to conquer the nations from Satan with a very high price. The price is his soul. And so Karl Marx was ultimately a Satanist. Behind communism, there's Satanism. And all of the leading, Lenin and Stalin, all these people said, Satan is our great example. He is the first revolutionary that led a revolution against the dictator God. Isn't it interesting? So they honor Satan as their great figure. They, in a sense, worship him as their figure. So I'm just kind of pulling some of these concepts together for you. It's not just once upon a time in Bible times there was Elijah and Baal and worship and all that. This is something all the way through Israel's history. It's a spiritual war where this god Baal with the Baal worship system was working to try to adulterate the bride of Yahweh. For us, we're the bride of Christ. Israel is called the bride of Yahweh. And trying to adulterate them by getting them to fall into another system and have other gods for themselves. So this is the work. He repossesses nations. And that's what he's doing across the Western world especially. As we as nations are rejecting Judeo-Christianity, where the Ten Commandments has been taken out of schools, it's been taken out of law courts, it's been taken out of Parliament. They're trying to take prayer out of Parliament. They took it out of schools a long time ago. They took it out of the law courts a long time ago. They still have the Bible, but you don't have to use it anymore. You can swear in on the Quran, or you can swear in on anything. You could have a satanic Bible if you want and swear in on that right now in Parliament. And so when this vacuum takes place, this system is coming back in, but it's going to be a system that is going to be 7 times worse than what they originally had. So this is what we've got to think about. And this is what we're told in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. This spirit of lawlessness is already here, but the man of lawlessness cannot be revealed while the restrainer is restraining him. And it says, he who restrains it, that which restrains, I believe it's the Holy Spirit working through the church. We are to be restraining this, but we don't restrain it if we don't discern it. A lot of Christians don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And they don't know what's behind the voice. They don't know what's behind the smoke ceremonies. They think, oh, this is really great. We're honouring the Aboriginal people again. Smoke ceremony is an occult ritual. It's a counterfeit of the altar of incense. It's prayer to the demonic ruling spirits, the earth lords of the nation of Australia. And they're reopening the gates. Just like the gates of Baal are going everywhere, they're reopening gates. Okay. Now it's interesting, in Moses' day, they escape out of Egypt. The Lord rescues them out of Egypt and they go into the wilderness. Moses goes up on the mountain, has encounter with God. And while he's on Mount Sinai, he's 40 days and 40 nights away. And all the people say, where is Moses? I think he's died. He's an old fellow. He's more than 80 years old now. Well, he's been away for so long. He's probably climbed up the mountain, didn't take any food or water. He's probably dead. Okay, Aaron, who are we going to say? Who are we going to say is Yahweh that brought us up out of Egypt? Who are we going to say is our God? And so that's when Aaron says, bring all your gold here, and he molds a golden calf. The bull. Okay? And that's, by the way, Ibis or Ipis in the Egyptian pantheon. Okay? That's the Egyptian equivalent to Baal. So they go, this Baal that you worshipped in Egypt is Yahweh. See how this is working? They create Yahweh in another image. They use the word Yahweh or the name Jesus, but actually it's not him at all. It's a false Christ, a false Yahweh. Now it's interesting because Solomon, who started off with great wisdom in the worship of Yahweh, building the temple of Yahweh, married many pagan wives. When he married the pagan, hundreds of them, and when he married them, they brought all of their gods from their lands into Jerusalem, into the palace with Solomon. And Solomon set up for his wives the altars of Baal, altars of Asherah, altars of Moloch, and all the other names, Chemosh, and all these other names which are other names for Baal or Moloch or Asherah. He built all of these pagan altars and temples, and they were sacrificing on the altars of Moloch, and these would have been Solomon's children. So what we're told in the second book of Kings, God brings judgment on Israel because of the apostasy of Solomon. And God says, I'm going to divide the nation of Israel now, and you're going to have Judah, which will be the tribe of Judah, and the Levites were with them, and I think Benjamin was with them, and then all the other 10 tribes go under Israel. The first king of Israel, this is in 1 Kings chapter 12, the first king of Israel was called Jeroboam. So what does Jeroboam do? He goes to a place called Bethel. Remember Bethel? That's where, Jacob went up on the mountain and he saw the gateway and the stairway between heaven and earth, and so this is the gate of heaven, Bethel, the house of Elohim, the house of God. So Jeroboam goes to Bethel because he says, I don't want everyone going to Jerusalem to worship in the temple in Jerusalem, because that's the capital city of now the kingdom of Judah. We are Israel. We'll make Samaria our capital, but we're going to make Bethel our high place. And so in Bethel, not one, he builds 2 golden calves. And then he establishes his own priesthood. You don't have to be a Levite. You can be from any of the tribes of Israel. And if you want to be a priest and get involved with the priesthood, he gets now a new priesthood established. That's the beginning of the religion of the nation of Israel after the divided kingdom. So again though, look at this, pops up again, the 2 golden calves. And it's a time of great apostasy. It was a priesthood of apostasy. That leads to the next 7 generations, worse and worse and worse, till we get Elijah. He has to step on the scene and turn the nation back to God. The opposite of apostasy is turning a nation back to God, turn its heart back to God. Okay. Now part of this whole myth thing is breaching reality. There has to be something that breaches reality in people's minds. This is the goal of demonic powers, so that they actually will hallucinate or feel that they're seeing things that aren't there, or they're so opened up in the spirit that they see demonic manifestations. They always would go to the high places, and this is why when Baal the possessor has come back into Western nations, what is he doing? He's going to all of the high places, and he's re-establishing the altars of Baal in the high places. What are the high places? The 7 mountains of influence. That's the high place of family, religion, business, media, commerce, communications. So media, communications, commerce and business, government, education. Stop helping me because I'm getting my order all wrong. So he's gone. They're going to the high places of government and taking over, and then they're legislating laws that are anti-Christ or anti-God laws. Going to the high places of education. That's why in most high places of education, anyone of faith that goes into universities, very few people of faith come out as people of faith. They you know, I've got friends that are missionaries and their children are brought up as missionaries, and their children are now atheists. They were strong Christians before they went to uni. Now they believe in evolution and everything like that. And this whole thing, the high places of education, most universities in the Western world now have Marxist socialists propagating their belief systems, and they're paid to do it. They're promoting these globalist agendas. The global elites with finances. Once you're on the financial mountain at the top, and the whole of the media across the earth, there's something like 5 key people that rule most of the media over the earth. 5 key people. I'm not saying there's probably some little media outlets here and there, but most media is run by 5 people. These are global elites, economic powers, that they also sponsor governments, and these are the guys that manipulate wars and things. So you've got the top of the economic mountain, there's altars of Mammon and Baal up there, and the education system, government. Anyone that gets to the high place of government now, they usually have to be Freemasons in the Western governmental system. Freemasons worship, there's the Scottish Rite, they worship Yah Bel Long. Yah is Yahweh, Bel is Baal, Long is the god of Egypt. It's a syncretistic god made up of a mix of Baal worship and Christianity and Egyptology, etc. It's a mix. But the god of the York Rite is Apollyon. Apollyon is talked about in Revelation. It means destroyer. Apollo is Tammuz, the son of Nimrod and Semiramis. Apollo the destroyer. So they're literally worshipping Lucifer and Baal in their system. And when you want to get really high in government, to be a prime minister, you have to have bowed the knee.
Wow.
Okay? This is where things are going. And it's very rare for anyone. That's why they were so shocked with Trump, because Trump wasn't one of them, and he got to the top because of the election. That's why now I think there's a lot of work undermining elections. But at least most people in high levels of government have bought into the system, because they can't get high promotion into those ranks. Even now, CEOs over international companies are being removed from their positions if they don't agree with same-sex marriage. See, what they've done something globally to push out of centers of power on the 7 mountains anybody that is strongly holding a Judeo-Christian moral ethic or conservative values. Okay, so we're going to finish there for tonight, and next week we're going to come back and continue to look at this series. Heavenly Father, we want to ask for the spirit and power of Elijah to fill us, Lord, as we want to be a people that would stand before the Lord, as Elijah said to Ahab, in the name of Yahweh, whom before I stand. Lord, we want to stand before you. We want to stand on your holy mountain. We want to be a people that walk in your authority. We want your anointing to come against these things. We want you to open up our eyes. We want to be prophets that would warn. As Elijah went to the people, choose this day, do you worship Yahweh or do you worship Baal? And Lord, that we have to now bring to the people a choice. Who are they going to really worship? But we are the Yahweh representatives. Lord, we want to thank you they're more with us than that are against us. I want to thank you for the power of the anointing, the power of the holy angels, the power of the name of Jesus. I pray, Lord, against any sort of spirit of fear, any sort of spirit of timidity that would come into people's hearts and minds listening to this sort of teaching. Lord, that you would give us a boldness and a faith and a zeal and a fire. That, Lord, that we just burn with a holy righteous anger against this stuff. But, Lord, that we know that we wrestle not flesh and blood. It's not the natural governments. We're wrestling against powers and principalities and the rulers of darkness. And you've given us authority to do so. In Jesus' powerful name. Amen.
Amen.